The truth that most people overlook is that men feel deeply, often more than they let on, but their emotions are filtered through a fragile structure called the ego. It's not vanity or arrogance, it's a shield, a form of self-identity that many men use to navigate a world that rarely gives them space to be vulnerable. When that ego is hurt, especially by a woman he cares about, it doesn't just bruise his pride, it unsettles his sense of worth. He may not cry, he may not even speak, but inside a storm brews. Understanding this internal storm is the first psychological secret to not just repairing the damage, but deepening the bond. A man's ego is intricately tied to how he believes he's being perceived, especially by the woman he desires. When he feels disrespected, dismissed, or judged, it can shake his emotional foundation. What most women misunderstand in these moments is that his coldness, silence, or pulling away isn't always anger, it's protection. He's retreating into himself to regain a sense of control. And that retreat is often mistaken for indifference, which can make the woman panic or overcompensate, only widening the gap. But here's where things change when a woman chooses to understand the male ego instead of resenting it. She unlocks a hidden pathway into his heart, not by shrinking herself, and certainly not by begging for forgiveness, but by recognizing the wound beneath the silence. When you see the ego not as an enemy, but as a gateway to his emotional world, you begin to communicate in a way that disarms him. It's important to realize that the man who loves you doesn't want to stay distant forever. He just doesn't know how to come back without feeling smaller. If you're the one who triggered the ego bruise, whether intentionally or not, you hold a unique power. Not the power to control him, but the power to understand him at a depth most never reach, and that alone makes you unforgettable. Men don't usually talk about how much their sense of self is tied to the way a woman sees them. But when you hurt his ego, he's subconsciously asking, "Do you still respect me? Do I still matter to you?" And when he doesn't get a clear answer, he shuts down. The beauty is that you can answer those unspoken questions not through words alone, but through your presence, your tone, and the emotional energy you offer. It's less about saying, "I'm sorry I hurt you," and more about showing, "I see you, I still value you, I didn't mean to tear you down." That's the first key. You don't chase him, but you don't dismiss what happened either. You learn to read between the lines, to understand that under the surface, he's wrestling with feelings he's never been taught to name. And when a woman gives emotional safety to a man in that state, not by mothering him, but by respecting his silence while staying emotionally open, something profound begins to shift. He remembers who you are, not the one who hurt him, but the one who sees him when he's at his most fragile. And that's rare, that's powerful, that's what begins to rewire his emotional connection to you, not out of weakness, but from a place of deeper emotional truth. Because the secret isn't in making him forget the hurt. It's in becoming the one person who understands what that hurt really meant. When a man's ego is hurt, he rarely says what he truly feels. He might go quiet, act indifferent, or even seem angry. But underneath it all, he's carrying something he often can't express. This is where most relationships lose their way. The woman is waiting for clarity, waiting for him to open up. But he's been taught his whole life to hide emotional pain, especially if it makes him look weak. So what does he do? He buries it under silence, but that silence isn't empty. It's full of questions, self-doubt, and hidden wounds. This is where emotional mirroring becomes your most powerful tool. It's not manipulation, it's deep empathy. It's the ability to tune into his emotional frequency even when he's not speaking a word. Because when you mirror what he's feeling, when you reflect back his unspoken pain in a way that feels safe and non-judgmental, you make him feel seen. And that feeling, for a man, especially after an ego injury, is like emotional oxygen. You see, Men often don't need you to fix anything. They just need to feel like someone actually understands what's going on inside them. Not on the surface, not the mask they wear, but underneath that. A level where very few people ever reach. And when a woman mirrors his emotions when she senses that his anger is really hurt, that his silence is really fear, that his distance is really confusion, she becomes the emotional mirror he didn't even know he needed. The way you do this isn't by confronting him or demanding answers. It's by slowing down your own reactions and creating space for his truth. It's looking at him not as someone who's lashing out, but as someone who's trying to protect something inside that feels deeply shaken. It's using simple words like, "I can tell something shifted," or "I know that might have made you feel like I didn't value you," even if he doesn't respond right away. That moment of quiet recognition, that's the mirror. That's what starts to disarm his defenses. He might not show it instantly, but inside he feels it. Because for maybe the first time in that spiral of emotional shutdown, he's being seen, not judged, not blamed, not lectured, just seen. That's the space where love can return. That's where healing begins. And the truth is, when you do this, you shift his entire experience of the relationship. You show him you're not just another person who hurts and walks away, but someone who sees the full picture and still chooses to reach in with compassion. That doesn't just soften his heart, it earns his respect. And when a man both loves and respects a woman, that bond becomes almost unbreakable. Emotional mirroring isn't about becoming his therapist or walking on eggshells. It's about emotional intelligence. It's about choosing understanding over reaction. It's about realizing that his ego isn't the enemy. It's a wall built around a heart that still wants connection, but is afraid of getting hurt again. When you begin to speak to the unspoken parts of him, to the feelings he's never said out loud, you start to awaken a different version of him. One that wants to open up, one that wants to try again, one that realizes you're not the one tearing him down, you're the one holding the mirror that makes him feel whole again. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is what he was too afraid to say first. When a man feels like his ego has been bruised, he often stops seeing the relationship through the lens of love and starts seeing it through the lens of pride. That shift can be subtle but powerful. Instead of thinking about how much he cares for you, he starts focusing on how you made him feel small, overlooked, or not enough. This isn't always conscious most of the time. He's not even aware of the change happening inside him. But it shows up in his actions. He becomes distant, reactive, or emotionally guarded. The man who once leaned in now leans back, and the woman is left wondering what changed and how to bring back the connection. What many people don't realize is that love and ego often fight for the same space in a man's heart. When his ego is wounded, he becomes emotionally unavailable, not because he doesn't care, but because he's trying to protect what little pride he feels he has left. But there's a secret to reversing that emotional shutdown. The same way a woman can trigger a man's ego wound, she can also become the person who restores his sense of power and worth. Not by chasing him, and definitely not by over-apologizing, but by shifting her energy in a way that repositions her from being the source of his pain to being the one who helps him rise again. This is what it means to reverse the role, from being the one who hurt his ego to becoming the one who fuels it, not through manipulation, but through understanding. Men respond strongly to admiration. They open up to women who make them feel like they matter, like they're respected, like they're chosen. And when that emotional damage has occurred, the path back isn't through begging or proving yourself. It's through subtle reminders that he is still seen as strong in your eyes. It's in the way you speak to him, the tone of your voice when you say his name, the way you ask for his opinion on something you genuinely care about, the way you show appreciation for the things he does, even the small things. These moments rebuild his internal sense of significance. They reignite that powerful desire men have to be something valuable in a woman's life, not just wanted, but respected. And that respect, when it's sincere, heals him in ways words never could. It doesn't mean you're lowering your standards. It doesn't mean you're excusing any toxic behavior. What it means is that you understand what makes a man feel alive in love. And that's a rare kind of wisdom, because many people don't realize that men fall in love deeply when they feel emotionally successful with a woman. When they feel they can make her proud, make her happy, make her feel safe, and when that sense of emotional success is restored, even in small doses, his heart starts to open again. There's a powerful transformation that happens when a man feels that you still believe in him, even after conflict. When you choose to see the best in him while maintaining your own strength, you stop being the threat and start being the refuge. And that's when he begins to feel drawn to you again, not out of guilt or pressure, but out of a renewed emotional attraction. Because suddenly, you're no longer the person who knocked down his confidence. You've become the person who helped him rebuild it stronger. Because when you become the reason he feels like a man again, you also become the reason he falls in love with you all over again. There's a common belief that saying sorry makes you look weak, especially when dealing with a man who seems to be protecting his ego. But the truth is, the right kind of apology, one that's grounded in strength, clarity, and emotional maturity, can be the exact thing that begins to mend what's broken. When his ego has been hurt, he's not just reacting to the moment. He's questioning his value in your eyes. He's wondering if you still respect him, if you still see him as worthy, if you still choose him despite whatever was said or done. And when those questions are left unanswered, the emotional distance between you grows fast. A powerful apology isn't about groveling or taking all the blame. It's about standing tall in your truth, while still acknowledging the impact of your words or actions. It's saying, I see how that may have landed, and not, I'm worthless and wrong. That distinction is everything, because when a woman owns her part with grace, not shame, she disarms the defenses that a wounded man has built. He doesn't feel like he's being forced to forgive out of pity or pressure. He feels like he's being invited to reconnect as equals. Most men aren't used to emotional accountability from women. They're used to arguments, deflection, or emotional withdrawal. So when a woman steps forward and says something like, I didn't mean to make you feel like less, or I realize now how my words might have come across, it stops him in his tracks. Not because he wants an apology to win, but because he finally feels understood. And understanding, to a man nursing an ego bruise, is like medicine to his soul. But it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. The energy behind the words matters. If you say sorry but your tone is cold or defensive, the message won't land. But if your energy is open, calm, and grounded, he'll feel it, and that's when he starts to soften. That's when the wall begins to come down, because ego doesn't want dominance, it wants dignity. When you give him that space to feel whole again, not from a place of desperation, but from a place of love and strength, he'll begin to lean back in. This kind of apology also does something else. It shows him that you're emotionally safe, that you're not just reacting, but reflecting, that you're willing to grow with him instead of control him. And in a world where men are constantly told to man up, shut down, and move on, finding a woman who can acknowledge a wound without shrinking or shaming herself is incredibly rare. That rarity makes you unforgettable. It's important to remember that you're not doing this to win him back with words. You're doing it to clear the emotional fog between you, And when he sees that you have the courage to own your side while still holding your worth, something shifts in him. He doesn't just forgive, he reevaluates. He sees you not as the one who hurt him, but as the one who chose connection over pride. And in that moment, respect is reborn. And where there is respect, love has a chance to thrive again. Because the apology that's rooted in strength isn't a weakness, it's a bridge back to intimacy. After a man's ego has been wounded, one of the worst things you can do is try to fix everything immediately. As tempting as it is to reach out, to explain, to over-communicate, doing too much too soon can actually push him further away. When a man is hurt in that way, his emotional walls go up, not because he doesn't care, but because he needs time to feel in control again. And this is where most women misstep, not out of malice, but out of love. They rush to fix, to connect, to make things right. But the real secret lies in knowing when to lean back and let the space do its quiet work. Space doesn't mean giving up. It means giving him room to breathe, to process, and to feel the absence of your emotional presence. When done intentionally, with a calm energy instead of panic, this space can create a powerful shift in his mind. It activates something psychological, emotional curiosity. Instead of chasing answers or fighting through resistance, you become a mystery again. And that mystery has gravity. People always want what feels rare and peaceful. When you're no longer flooding him with explanations or attention, he's left with only his thoughts. At first, he might feel justified in his distance, but over time, as things settle and the emotional noise fades, he'll start to reflect. And that's exactly what you want. He'll begin to question whether what happened really defines you. He'll wonder if you still care. He'll remember the connection, not just the conflict. And here's the beautiful part. Absence has a way of highlighting presence. When you step back without bitterness, without drama, you signal emotional maturity. You show him that you're not reactive, not trying to control the outcome. And that calm confidence becomes incredibly attractive. You're no longer just the woman who hurt his ego. You're the woman who respected his emotional space enough to not rush his healing. That alone plants a seed in his heart because it shows strength, not desperation. This doesn't mean you vanish or play games. It means you shift your focus. Instead of trying to fix him or the situation, you turn inward. You invest in your own peace. You continue growing, glowing, and holding space for him without clinging to the outcome. And trust me, he feels that. Even if you're not speaking, he senses the shift. He might see a post, hear about you, or simply feel the difference in energy. And that's when curiosity takes over. He'll start asking himself, why hasn't she reached out? Does she still care? Was I too harsh? And without realizing it, he's emotionally re-engaging. That emotional space you created becomes the silence he can't ignore. He'll begin comparing your absence to the presence of others. And often, no one will measure up, because you didn't just disappear, you withdrew with grace, and that is unforgettable. Space used wisely is not distant, it's power. It's an invisible force that allows both of you to reset emotionally. It gives him the time to miss you, to rethink, to soften. And when you do reconnect, it's not from a place of tension or fear. It's from clarity and strength. That makes everything feel new again, but with deeper emotional grounding. Because sometimes the loudest thing you can say to a man is your silence wrapped in self-respect. One of the most powerful ways to make a man love you again after his ego has been hurt is to show him growth, real, quiet, undeniable personal growth. When a man sees the woman who once triggered pain evolve into someone stronger, wiser, and more emotionally centered, it changes everything. It doesn't erase what happened, but it shifts how he remembers it, because men may not always express it, but they're deeply impacted by a woman's energy. And when that energy evolves, it invites them to see you through a completely new lens. You don't have to tell him you've changed. You don't have to make dramatic statements or post curated pictures that scream transformation. What you do instead is become the change. You let the pain you once caused, or the misunderstanding that once fractured the connection, become the fire that forges a better version of yourself. Not just for him, for you. And when that shift is real, it's felt. It radiates in how you speak, how you move, how you handle tension, how you treat others, and most importantly, how you treat yourself. Men are not oblivious to this kind of transformation. Even if they act like they've moved on, they still notice. They remember how you reacted before, and now they see how you respond with grace, control, and a softness that doesn't come from weakness, but from emotional strength. That contrast, that quiet evolution, becomes impossible to ignore, and it starts stirring something inside him. Because now, you're not just the same person hoping for another chance. You've become someone new, someone who's learned, grown, and risen above the moment of conflict. Growth doesn't mean pretending to be perfect. It means you've taken the time to understand yourself. You've processed what happened. You've owned your role in it without losing your self-worth. That depth is rare. That emotional awareness is magnetic. When a man sees that you're no longer reacting from fear or insecurity, but responding from inner peace, he can't help but admire that. Respect grows, and from that respect, love often finds its way back. It's in the way you speak about your life now, not with bitterness, but with hope. It's how you no longer try to force love, but instead let it find you. It's how you carry yourself with grace even when you're uncertain. This growth makes you captivating. It makes him realize that the woman he once knew was only a part of your story, not the whole picture. And this new version of you, she's not only someone to love, she's someone to value. You also create a shift in the power dynamic, not to control, but to rebalance. Because now, you're not coming from a place of needing his love to feel whole. You've done the inner work. You've cultivated self-respect. You've built an emotional foundation so strong that if he chooses to love you again, it's no longer out of guilt or nostalgia. It's out of admiration and true emotional alignment. And that kind of love, that's the love that lasts. It's one thing to say you've changed. It's another thing to embody it. When your growth speaks louder than your words, when your peace is stronger than your need to prove a point, when your presence commands respect without ever demanding it, that's when he truly sees you, not just as the woman who once hurt him, but as the woman who rose above the pain and became unforgettable. Because the deepest kind of love is born not in perfection, but in evolution.